built to last, built to last. Real stories, built to last. Built to last.
Welcome back to Built to Last, the show where I sit down with the people actually building the world, not just talking about it. I'm Kim Richardson, founder of CSH Hub, a construction management platform built for the way construction actually works, across borders, across trades, and across every phase of a project. Today's guest joined a Nashville architecture firm in 1998 and never left, because he never needed to. He grew inside MJM Architects for 25 years, helped lead the acquisition of a longtime engineering partner, and is now steering the firm as president and CEO through one of the most significant chapters in its nearly 40-year history. His firm is 100% employee-owned, fully integrated across architecture and engineering, and working on projects nationwide from their Nashville headquarters. Mathew Root, welcome to Built to Last.
Thank you.
For people who don't know MJ Architects yet, how would you describe what the firm does and who you do it for?
Well, MJM is a nationally known firm that focuses on retail and commercial architecture. We also do a lot of other work as well, but that's what we're most known for. We've built our career building relationships with retail partners and developers, and have expanded from the early days of working with service merchandise through those relationships, built other relationships. We now, count a lot of national retailers among our client base and work with developers all across the country.
Okay, and that's a great clientele to have. And you have an MBA alongside your architecture licenses, an unusual combination. What drew you to architecture in the first place? And when did you realize you also needed to understand the business side of it?
So what drew me to architecture in the first place, I'll just say, first of all, my dad was a civil engineer. He was in the U.S. Army, went to West Point. He then went and got his engineering degree, and so he worked in the Corps of Engineers. His grandfather, or great-grandfather, was a project engineer on the Hoover Dam. It's building things, something he taught me from a really young age, worked alongside him, fixing things, building things, making furniture, working around the house, learning, how to use my hands to put things together. And I was just drawn more towards architecture than engineering in sort of the way architects problem solve. It tends to be a little bit different than engineering. Usually in engineering there's a clear better way. Maybe not. It's still not necessarily good or bad or binary choice, but there does tend to be more better ways, whereas in architecture, the better way is often very subjective.
Okay.
The better way what I think is the better way to solve a problem might be very different than what the client thinks is the better way. Yeah. There's a lot more sort of negotiating results in architecture in that side of the practice.
That's it's so interesting that it's problem solving more than design.
Yeah.
It's what brought you into it, and you could tell it's like the Army background too that kind of led you, and so that you're the first person I heard. It was more like problem solving, like the stimulation of it than the design aspect.
I was the kid who took things apart to see how they work and try to put them back together. Usually you get all the pieces back in, but not always.
Yeah, that's very cool. And it's interesting you brought up the Army, because my next question for you is that you grew up as an Army kid, moving around constantly, and I believe you said you were living in Germany, never really having one place to call home. And then in 1998, you joined MJM and stayed for 25 years. Does that ever come up for you when you think about like what you've built here?
It does, and I think you never know how your background is different than somebody else's background, right? So mine was constantly one of change, but then again, most of the other people that I was with growing up through childhood, they were all in the same sort of condition as well. It really wasn't until we moved to Tennessee in '88 for my last 2 years of high school, where there was a really stark difference that I noticed, because we moved down into a city not too far from here, which is near the UTSI Space Institute, and it's also, there's an Air Force base there, but it's mostly civilian contractors, and all the towns around there. It was kind of the first time I was ever in an environment where everybody else had known each other almost their entire lives.
Oh, yeah.
And I was the only person that was kind of the new kid, or that didn't have some of that shared history. Whereas prior to that, I was born in Germany. We lived in Michigan, California, Virginia, Oklahoma, back to Germany. I'm probably forgetting one in there somewhere too. But you move every 2 or 3 years. That change is just sort of the norm, and it's just kind of what you're used to. And home isn't a place. Home's just is your people. It's your family, those you're close to, and it doesn't really matter. The physical place doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah.
Now, when we moved to Tennessee, this is then where I went to college. After graduating, I moved to Nashville, worked in another firm for a couple of years before joining MJM. But I think maybe it's a roundabout way of answering your question, but I think the change and adaptability is certainly a big part of my nature. But I think that idea that home is the people is part of what drew me to stay at MJM, and is part of what kind of drives me now to build a company that's based around the employee ownership and the people that work there.
I think the fact about home being where the people are is like a significant for me, like as a foreigner, and any other foreigners who may be like watching or listening, because when you leave your country and you're starting a life new, you never feel like you fit in,
right?
And you're always like searching. Like I thought about, oh, maybe I should move to Portugal or Spain when I was like younger, but I never really thought about the aspect that home is, the people make you feel home, not necessarily where you are. So that's something significant to keep in mind.
Find your people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean, that doesn't mean that just get insular and only have a small group. But you can find people everywhere you go that share your interests, maybe your background, but definitely your sort of mindset and interests and things like that.
How long did it take you to like adjust to like the people, since like they already had their own thing? Like how long did it take you to adjust and kind of feel like it was home?
In Tennessee, it probably it came in stages. I mean, when I was first looking at college, having only been here 2 years, Tennessee, University of Tennessee in Knoxville was where I ended up going, but it was my only sort of local university that I was looking at. I was looking at Arizona, Cornell, University of Florida, Rice, Washington University in St. Louis. Those were all places that I got accepted to. There were a lot of reasons why I ended up going to Knoxville. The chief among them was just financial. It meant I could get an education without going into debt.
Yeah.
But even then, my intention was always to leave Tennessee. It really wasn't until spending time at school with you get very close in the School of Architecture. It's a small class. Typically, my class my graduating class is less than 60 people, and you form some really close and tight relationships in there, and a bunch of them are here in Nashville, and and we still get together, not as often as anybody would like, probably,
Yeah.
but we try to make it happen as much as we can. But so it really wasn't until I came to Nashville, did a couple of internships during the summers, and it really wasn't until then that I kind of started to feel like this was home and this was the place to stay. And so I came back to Nashville after graduation and never left.
That's cool. That's I think that also plays into like how life is never how we plan it.
Yeah.
So that's good you were able to find a home here. When you joined MJM in 1998, Nashville was a very different city and the firm was a very different size. What was it about MJM that made you want to build your career there rather than somewhere else?
Like I said, I had worked at another firm prior to joining MJM. When I first graduated, Steve Marr, my former partner now, he had left that firm that we had been at together, and he was working at what was then called Maxwell Architects.
Okay.
And he had we had talked, and I actually interviewed there and considered going to Maxwell Architects directly out of school. I think at the time there were 7 people. My other option was to go back to the firm that I'd interned at for 2 summers, and I ended up going back there. I just felt like I had at the time a sort of a faster track to have some more responsibility. But after a couple of years, I started looking around, and at that point, the year before I came to MJM, Steve Marr and Kurt Johansson joined with Steve Maxwell to form what was then called Maxwell Johansson Marr Architects. Later, we shortened it to MJM just to make it a little easier on everybody.
I didn't even know that. Look at that. Okay.
Yep.
That's cool.
I think people got tired of answering the phone. Maxwell Johansson Marr Architects.
That's okay. I didn't even think about what the abbreviation for MJM was. That's pretty cool.
So when I started looking around, I talked to Steve again, and at that time, the firm was still a small firm. It was, I believe, there were either 10 or 11 employees when I joined. We're in a small office not too far from here, actually, up the street, and all in one room. Pretty much is a very collaborative and communal environment. People seem to enjoy working together, which was a little different experience than I was having at the time. And that was one of. I also had an opportunity to join a much larger firm in town. At that time, I chose the smaller firm because of the relationship I had with Steve. Was certainly part of it, but also just I think just the way I spent an afternoon over there, just kind of hanging out and seeing how everybody interacted together and
just
how
like
they
the
worked,
repertoire.
and just really liked the collaborative way they all worked together. And the work type was different than what I'd been doing. Seemed interesting and seemed like a place where I could build my career. I guess I was right.
You were, and I think that that culture still is there to this day. So
I hope so.
I hope so. Well, I can encourage you that it is. You spent over 2 decades at MJM before stepping into the CEO role. What did that progression look like? And what do you think you learned by growing inside one firm that you couldn't have learned by moving around? I think you kind of touched on it a little bit.
Maybe a little bit. So I joined the firm in '98. Became licensed later that year. That same year is when I got my first license in Tennessee. And then started, just kind of really putting all of my effort into trying to get better and advance my career while advancing the interests of the company as well. It's a unique environment for a lot of firms, which I hope is part of what I still try to hold on to today, is that there's opportunities for people to build a body of work within the company. The principals have never monopolized the relationships with clients. We allow, and they always did allow, employees to form those relationships with clients directly for the benefit of everybody, really. It shows that it makes everybody take a lot of care in what they're doing. They care about their client success, but in the end, that really builds that builds trust in those relationships and really builds things going forward. I became a junior partner in 2006, and at the time, again, it was Maxwell Johansson Marr. Then I joined. About a year after that, another person joined as a partner. Kurt retired, and it was so there was 5 of us for a while. Then in 2016, the newest partner and the oldest partner both retired in the same year. So that was the year that that the founder, Steve Maxwell, retired. Okay. And so then it was just Steve and I as partners, and from that was 2016. We also moved offices at that point. We just really just kind of dug in, started looking at succession plan and what that looks like down the road. We named a few associates, who are now the VPs in the company. At the time, they were associates. We were still privately held at that point, just 2 partners, working as an LLC. And as we started looking at what the next transition might look like, which was Steve's retirement, Steve Marr's retirement, started thinking about what that looks like, but how do we continue the firm? One of the things, this is a little bit of a tangent, I suppose, but most architectural firms, 75% of like all architectural firms are less than 10 people. Okay. And 25% or so are sole practitioners, just one person working by themselves. So it's a very kind of entrepreneurial profession in general. And the sort of the thing that happens is as you do scale, get into a mid-sized firm and then maybe even a large firm, is can you maintain that sort of that same kind of entrepreneurial energy, and can you maintain those kind of relationships that are what really has driven our business in particular, right? We don't do a lot of bid work where it's all based on relationships and referrals, and to maintain that, you've got to keep people around. That's super important, and provide them opportunity. Well, as the bigger and bigger you get, the harder and harder it is to have a successful succession plan, because of the, frankly, at some point, the dollars of what a buyout looks like gets really, really difficult to ask people to buy in. And so a lot of firms look to outside sources like private equity. There's a lot of founder-led firms that are selling to private equity and transitioning out that way. Okay. So there's a lot of consolidation on that market. That really wasn't something that interested us. It just, I think it probably works for some firms. I don't think that model necessarily fits the way we operate and kind of the culture of our company. The other options you could look at is merging with another firm that's has more similar values, but you might lose the identity of the firm in that as well. There's very seldom ever a true merger of equals, right? It's usually one company acquiring another. But we had some talks along those lines a few times with a couple of different companies. Still have some good relationships with those firms today, but in the end, it was about 2022 that we really started looking at ESOP as an option, employee ownership as a potential way to to provide succession that allows leaders to lead without also requiring them to mortgage their house.
Yeah.
You can develop leaders, develop people based on their actual skill set without having to worry about necessarily their financial ability to be an owner.
Yeah.
Because you've taken that part of it off the table by going to an ESOP and becoming 100% employee owned. And I think that really was just for us, it was the best decision. It sort of employee ownership really builds on and fills in our sort of DNA of people owning the work, like owning their clients, owning the outcomes of what they do.
Being proud of it.
And now they actually own the company too.
Yeah.
So it just makes sense.
Yeah. Since you thrive off problem solving, during that time, would you say that your mentality was more of, we're going to get this together, like we're going to keep pushing, or do you feel like you were frustrated during that time, or at any point where you're like, I don't know what to do?
The actual process of becoming an ESOP?
Well, like the process of ESOP, or when like your partners were retiring and it was just you and Steve, like that whole journey that
yeah,
phase.
I mean, a lot of that is really not knowing what to do. It is about it's learning as you go. All of my ownership journey was learning as you go.
Yeah.
Including the founder exit, growth. Of course, we dealt with. I became a partner in 2006, and in 2008, the world collapsed. Right.
Yeah.
That was, my first big challenge in leadership was how do you deal with just an industry that's come to a complete stop.
Yeah.
We had a flood in 2010 that, closed our office down, and we had to relocate. We were downtown at that point, and the entire office was flooded. The basement was flooded. Electrical gear was underwater.
Oh my goodness.
We got a client that let us camp in their space. They had some extra space. Let us camp there for about 3 months, I think, until we could get back into our building.
Wow.
COVID, all of those challenges come up, and every single one of them is you're just kind of trying to learn as you go and do the best that you can and make the best decisions you can. And all of that, and then leading in, then becoming an ESOP and going through that process and trying to learn what that meant. And that requires a completely different level of governance and compliance in terms of trustees and board with outside members and all those sorts of things that you don't have when you're a small privately held company. And it was really sort of maybe a lesson learned 20 years too late, but that's when I went back to school and got my MBA.
Yeah. But you still were progressing, so.
Sure, yeah.
So in 2023, because we're going through the timelines now, we talked about MJM transition to 100% employee ownership through a sale to an employee first. And you already touched on like what drove that choice. Can you tell us what does it mean practically for how the firm operates and how people show up to work now that they're being? I know that you talked about like, it's them owning it so they can be more priding it, but can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. So one thing that's interesting, I think, is that, only about half of the employees at MJM and Entech right now were there before we became an ESOP.
Okay.
So I think, right at half are pre-ESOP, and then the rest are folks that have joined after. So we've had a lot of growth, in that time period since we became an ESOP. But it really was building on this idea of owning the work and owning the outcomes, and we've made a lot of sort of changes in the way we present and share information with the employees. So they're fully aware of how we're doing, what's going on financially and otherwise. We've tried to, create a culture of ownership around things like, benefits and what the office looks like, what the environment looks like, what type of work should we, do and focus on. And it takes time, right? It's been 3 years now, but that's really just when a big change like that starts to kind of sink in for the folks that were around before, right? For the folks that have joined since, they came into something that was already like that.
Yes, established.
Yeah. So it is a thing. It takes a while, and if you try to go to, as I always feel like I've got one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake, trying to balance, or maybe somebody else has their foot on the brake, but trying to understand the just being in a hurry to get to the firm that I would like for us to be, but understanding it takes time to change behaviors sometimes and make people really believe that this is a true sort of change in the company and the culture.
And that is going to benefit them as well. It's not going to make their life more crazy or hectic. Yeah.
It takes a while to start to see that, in things like, sharing the income statements. And I think most importantly, for people's growth and development is, for most architects and engineers, if you're in a privately held company, you never hear terms like net profit or EBITDA or net service revenue or operating margin or any of those kind of things, because they're all part of like the information that a company keeps private or amongst the owners. And so a big part of what we're doing now is also trying to educate everybody about what those things are and what they mean, so they can see how their work ties to it.
Yeah. So with talking about transitioning, because I originally, from experiencing like the culture, I thought MJM and Entech had been working together for like years, but you guys had worked together for 25 years, and then, as we talked about, at some point, someone decided it made more sense to build that relationship or bring it in-house. What was the thinking, and what does full integration make possible that the partnership model couldn't?
A lot to unpack there. So there's a lot. There's financial reasons for pursuing an acquisition or a merger like that. Again, it's the old model of architectural services involve things like marking up consultant fees.
Okay.
So if you were paying an engineering company $10,000, you charged $11,500 for that service. Yeah. The days of markups are gone. So generally speaking, any consulting costs are passed through. They're straight passed through. So
and that's like a standard across the industry. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Maybe some government work still might allow markups, but for the most part, I think they've mostly gotten rid of them as well. Okay. It's just the clients no longer think that that's a cost that they want to pay. And they don't see the benefit of it. Architects are often very terrible at selling the benefits of their services. Okay. And what that fee was intended, that those markups were intended to cover, is the cost of the coordination, right? Well, now you have to sort of include that coordination in the time and that you're spending on the work without the benefit of a markup. So if you can bring that in-house in a bigger company where you then now have a a greater spread of overhead and things like that, then you can accomplish the same work and hopefully do it more efficiently, keep that revenue in-house instead of paying it out directly out the door. But it's also about just improving the coordination and the collaboration in the work process, because ultimately we own those outcomes. Like I've said that word a few times, but we do, and the responsibility of making sure that work is well coordinated and a fit for the purpose of the project is the responsibility of the team. And the idea is that being together, being integrated as a company like that, it should improve that coordination from the beginning of a project. You're no longer necessarily dealing at kind of arm's length. They have our engineering team has earlier insight into what projects we're looking at, and if we're talking about what projects to take on or what to do, it's not. There's just more conversation, more collaboration around those entities. So we've had structural engineering for a while. We first brought on structural engineering in 2004, I believe it was. Then we had a little break, 2010 to 2014, something like that, and then brought structural back on again. The next step was MEP. And looking around, Entech was just a really great fit for us. As I said, I've known Mitch my entire professional career. He was always just a good partner in the other firms that I've worked at and at MJM to us. Similar cultures, not exactly the same, of course, but similar. Mitch, in the same way, was looking for a way for that firm to be able to continue, and Ben as well, and for looking for that firm to be able to continue when they're no longer a part of it, and not necessarily seeing a good, easy way to transition. This is a way to not just make sure all their people were taken care of, which is really important to them, but that they also then would all become owners of the company too, because all the Entech folks became employee owners the day they joined as well. Yeah. So
this speaks volume on the culture. It's like peaceful, like listening to it. Just because again, I just working with like Mitch and everyone, I can see how great the culture's been, and the fact that there's people who've been here for so many years speaks volume of it. And then just listening to the journey as well just talks about how much you guys care about the employees. So that's very good to hear. Taking two firms that have worked together for 25 years and making them truly one is harder than it sounds. What has the integration actually looked like, and what surprised you about it?
Well, so the integration, it's still ongoing. Operationally, it's 99% there. I think culturally, there's still a little more room to go, but there's not any big conflicts. It's just that there's just more work to do. Yeah. Knew it was going to be difficult going in. I mean, it's just not going to be easy. We don't use the same software, same platforms, and so understood that integration was going to be a challenge. It's going to take a while. I'm a little surprised at how. I think the cultural integration is actually happening a little bit faster than I expected it to, which is a pleasant surprise. But understand that we went into it with a plan for that last year, and we put together a leadership integration team that included people from both companies. And again, our structural team, which was part of MJM Architects, is now part of Entech. So part of that integration was also moving structural underneath the engineering name and brand. So it was kind of a three-way integration in some sense. But we put a team together. We met every month. We did some group company-wide activities and events last year to try to help build that through some cross-functional teams and training and some things like that. So there's still work to do there, but I think it's gone really well.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. And well, I know it's going well internally, but from like your client's perspective, what does it mean to have architecture, engineering, interior design, and master planning all in one house? How does that change the project experience?
Well, I think for our clients who generally are very, very, very positive about having an integrated team, is that it's that they feel that as a firm that us helping them is not as dependent on us being able to leverage another partner to make sure that they're helping us when maybe they've got competing client interest. And so I think for a lot of our clients, it's just they get a little bit of it's a peace of mind. Now, we don't do all of our own work. We still have some really great engineering partners that we work with regularly. And we have great relationships with a couple of those outside teams, and they're still a big part of what we offer to our clients. But it does. There are certain clients that absolutely 100% want fully integrated service. That's kind of like a deal breaker for them.
Okay. Just full turnkey.
Yep. And we're not there yet. We don't have civil. But
working on
it.
Okay. And your specialty is retail construction, prototype rollouts, and multi-site programs. You're solving the same problem dozens of times across different markets and zoning requirements. What does it take to do that well?
Flexibility, adaptability, strong systems, and knowledge sharing.
Okay.
Because again, we often work in the same jurisdiction, right? So, but it's a different client, but it's the same jurisdiction. So that company knowledge, that historical information we have about what it was like to work in this jurisdiction, or here's a thing you have to do here. This city only accepts drawings in 24 by 36 format, just things like that. So having that institutional knowledge that we can build and share amongst our teams. But a lot of people misunderstand what prototype work is. The actual real definition of a prototype is a thing that's not actually the thing that gets built.
Okay.
Right? If you're designing a product and you're prototyping, you're creating a bunch of different versions of something until you finally arrive at the final product. Yeah. And in essence, retail rollout is very similar. I mean, retailers are not stagnant. They don't lock in a design typically and then just sit on it for years and years. They're constantly evolving and adapting to the market, what they see, feedback they get from their customers, trends they see in the market, new services or markets they want to provide. And so the prototyping process is constantly adapting to those things. Most prototypes get updated multiple times a year, and then those roll out through the actual stores and programs and things. When you do this long enough, you can kind of almost walk into a store and I could almost tell you when it was built based on what it looks like inside. It's like, that's a 2012 version or a 2015. But they also they go back and refresh and renovate and retrofit. They adapt to changing consumer demands. Like I said, there was not a store 25 years ago that had some place where you could do like a locker pickup or a buy online pickup in store. Right now, it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Retailers have to adapt to those things, and then those things have actual changes they make to the building and how it looks, how it functions. How do you do that? How do you keep it secure? How do you prevent shrink or theft in doing that?
Yeah.
How does that affect the way they staff a store? All of those things, are things that all those retailers have to work out.
Yeah.
And they have really strong teams internally that they use typically that just know their product and their designs inside and out. And so we work with them. We also are able to help because we have a lot of the same institutional knowledge, having worked with them for 20 or 30 years. But it's really is about it's a partnership with those internal teams. It's less in some other. I think it's probably rarer and rarer, but there are still the know-it-all architect, like I know better than the client, right? And you should listen to me.
Yeah.
That's rarer and rarer, I think, in all
That's good.
in all industries.
Yeah.
Because most of these companies, or even institutions, school systems, things like that, right? They also have in-house experts, architects, engineers, contractors that they have on their staff that are highly involved in the design and construction process.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that because I was talking with another CFO architect firm and just speaking to him as well. It's like the construction industry is now starting to realize how important relationships is, and being willing to adapt and progress is significant, and like having a good workflow. So it's interesting just hearing like the little dynamics of behind like a retail company, them having a team that knows things by the back of their hand, but also ensuring you guys have a good relationship and just work together and progress and are open to change, how important and significant it is in this industry. Which brings me to architecture-contractor relationships. You spent 25 years working with general contractors on projects of all sizes. From your side of the table, what makes an architect-contractor relationship really work, and where does it most commonly break down?
It's the same answer to both questions. It's just communication.
Yeah.
With a little bit of intent in there, right? Yeah. If we all approach a project from the viewpoint that we all have the same intent, which is to complete a project on time and on budget, and that it's profitable for all. If we all go in with that same intent and assume best intentions from the other partners, then if you have good communication, the project's going to go smooth.
Yeah.
If you have good communication, but bad intent, then things go really bad. Yeah. And if you have really bad communication and bad intent,
the double,
then it's really bad. And when I say bad intent, so when things go sideways, when people start having separate conversations, like the contractor and the architect are talking without the owner, or the contractor and the owner are talking without the architect, or architect and an owner are talking without the contractor. When you start to have that dynamic emerge, it's going to be unpleasant because at that point, at least somebody has assumed bad intent.
Yeah. That
they've decided that one party of the team is at fault or not to be trusted. And if there's not trust in there and good communication, then it's usually not going to go well.
Agreed. I've experienced it firsthand, so 100% agree. Well, to talk about the AEC world, since we mentioned communication, the AEC world is being reshaped by technology faster than almost any point in its history. We've spoke about this as well. From where you sit, running a full-service firm, what's generally changing, and what is the industry still getting wrong about how it adopts technology?
Well, I'll start with what the industry gets wrong. It's what most people get wrong, and it's something that, in our company, you'll hear our director of operations say quite often is that the hardest part of any system to change is the user.
Agreed.
And so new tech, new tools, new toys are great, but if you can't show a benefit to the user that's immediate, really, and with kind of almost immediate feedback that this improves your workflow, and all you're doing is giving somebody an extra task to do, an already overloaded person a new thing to learn, and often it involves unlearning something else. And that can be, psychologically off-putting. It puts someone in a position of being, unsure and unsteady, and they're going to just default back to
what they were doing
the
before.
familiar way of doing things. Tech is moving very fast, and there are certainly a lot of really good tools that are available. I think most firms, at least on the A&E side, most firms think that they're sort of behind in adoption. But the funny thing is, when they do surveys of that in the industry, everybody thinks that they're behind, and then it turns out that everybody is at about the same place. So it's not as dire as sometimes people think it is. My biggest long-term concern about some of the, specifically AI, is that generally speaking, the easiest skills or the easiest tasks to replace are those that are done by junior level employees. And architecture and engineering, just like construction, is an industry where it's not a true apprenticeship, maybe, but it is like an apprenticeship. You learn by doing those tasks, and before you build on them, it's a laddered learning. You got to build on those lower level tasks, those entry level tasks, build upon that, and until you're, doing higher level tasks. And if the tools start doing all the lower level tasks, then how is the next generation going to learn?
That's true. If it's encouraging to you, because you're using it myself in day-to-day work, I will say that while AI expedites like the reviews of RFI and submittals, there's still like a skill of knowing what the RFI is about that's still needed.
Right.
So I think it is imperative that the juniors still need to know what their job is about, how it makes sense, like the core, the space planning, where everything goes, because AI will give that generic informative review of it, but you still need to know how to filter it, like just day-to-day skills, like, a GC is not going to do this. Even if the AI is requesting it, the GC is not going to do this. So I think there's still like cores that will always be needed to be learned in the industry, even with AI.
I think you're right. I guess my thing is, like you said, you need someone with skill to make sure that that answer is correct and all of that. But the way people build that skill is typically doing the part of it that the AI is doing. And you've probably seen the sort of adoption diagram that Claude has done. And if you look at that, what they say is the potential for what AI can do in AEC versus what's been actualized so far, it's only like 3%, 4% of what they claim, at least, is the potential impact it could have.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that worries me about it. We'll have to change the way we teach and the way we help people learn, which it's not an insurmountable thing by any means, but it's a problem that we haven't solved or addressed or even really addressed at all.
Yeah. Well, my next question to you is an advice to a young architect. Since we're talking about the junior levels, if a young architect just got their license and asked you the one thing they should do differently than your generation did, what would you tell them?
So someone who just got licensed. So that's a different career point up for advice. I say someone who just got licensed should recognize that they're still not ready to practice.
Okay.
And they still have a lot to learn.
Okay.
I do think they should, depending on what they're interested in. If they're interested in taking the entrepreneurial track, then they should get involved in something like some business school classes, some things like that, rather than just assume that the license is like all you need to practice. That's where a lot of folks fail.
Okay.
The second thing I would say is become an expert in something. A subject matter, something that interests you. Pick something. You want to be a generalist. You want to have a general knowledge of things. But if you have a thing that you're just like really, really good at, whether it's sustainability, energy code, code analysis, quality control, whatever it is, hone that skill too, and that would make you valuable to employers. Taking some classes or things about public speaking or leadership training is also, I think, really important. And it's a big part of what's missing out of a traditional architect's education. If you say like 25% are just people practicing on their own, that's a person that needs to know how to talk to clients.
Yeah.
They need to know how to walk into a room of strangers and, try to get work.
Yeah.
They need to know how to do billing.
Yeah.
They need to know how to pay their taxes.
Yeah.
They need, they need to know about insurance and how to tell a good contract from a bad contract. Yeah. All sorts of things
Critical
like that
thinking.
that you do not learn in architecture education, or really even those aren't really things that are touched on more than fleetingly in the exams and internship process.
Agreed. And my last question to you is, and it's the one this show is named for, what does it mean to you to build something that lasts?
So are you talking about like the Jim Collins built to last, or
I mean, just like theoretically, or just foundership wise, like what does it mean to you to build something that lasts, like something that will remain for generations, essentially?
Well, you hope it would, right? So I think maybe part of my background is that things don't always last, and the things that do last are the things that are adaptable and changeable. They don't stay frozen in time. Things that freeze in time reach the end of their time, and so when you look at companies that again what most public companies don't last more than 30 years these days. Private companies can sometimes last if 2 to 3 generations if they're family held. Usually founder-led companies, most don't live past the founder.
Yeah.
So I do actually think that the path that we've chosen by going to employee ownership is a way to try to build something that lasts. It's a company that, as long as there's employees, there are owners.
Yeah.
And as long as we can keep adapting, changing, and meeting the needs of the clients as they adapt and change, that's how I think we build a company that lasts. The buildings don't. I mean, there are buildings that have,
Yeah.
but they're few and far between, especially in the United States, right? We don't tend to build things to last hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
We've only been a country for 250, so. But most of, we very often work on the same buildings over and over again. We'll go back and remodel or touch them or do something else to them, adapt them. I think that is maybe part of a thing that it's not uniquely American, but it's definitely common in America, is that we're constantly adapting things, changing them to suit new purposes and an uncertain future. Because again, if you just lock into what something is right now and say, well, this is the way it's going to be, you're going to miss out on what the future holds.
Yeah. So you're saying physically, building-wise, it's probably a little bit more difficult, but community-wise and company-wise, the core essences of having a good culture, a good team, making sure that they feel valued in that company or community belongs to them will essentially help it last.
Yeah, as I said, when you mentioned Built to Last, I think of the Jim Collins book.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key concepts in there that he talks about too. One, he talks about a company that's built to last always has a big, hairy, audacious goal, right? Like, I suppose ours is to expand employee ownership across our industry. I think it is the best model for the type for this industry. And it fits with the entrepreneurial spirit of what it means to be an architect or an engineer, but still allows people to be collaborative and communal in their work, mm-hmm. and work together towards a purpose. The other thing that he talks about in that book is preserving the core and then stimulating progress. And so I think of that too in terms of a company, is preserving our core, our identity, what we are. We are a retail architecture and engineering firm.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that's all we can be. We can grow from that. We can build from that. But we are fundamentally, that's the core of who we are, and built around a group of people that are focused together on serving their clients, serving each other, and serving their communities.
I think that's a very strong statement, preserving your core. And I think a lot of founders who see this it'll speak volume to them as well, preserving the core, because as you progress in your company, it's kind of hard to remember what led you to start it. What was meaningful to you, especially if you have like investors get involved or anything of that sort. So thank you so much. I think a lot of what you said throughout our conversation, it spoke a lot to me in my journey as well. And so I appreciate you so much for taking the time to come on the show and just give your information, your journey, and share your story. For all of you who are listening or viewing this video, Built to Last is for any contractor, architect, anyone involved in the construction industry who just wants to learn more about growing or just feeling like you're not alone in this journey of being in this industry. We are releasing our videos every Tuesday bi-weekly. So feel free to join, leave comments, share your feedback. And once again, I'm Kim Richardson, founder and CEO of CSH Hub, and I will see you guys next time.
From the ground up, brick by brick, every story built with grit. Hands that shape the skyline high. These are the ones who